Hey, everybody, welcome to The Choice, where we explain and explore everything that a real estate agent has done to make the choice to get into the business, the choice to go full time, and the choice ultimately to be where they're at. Today, we are talking to Carrie Hill, and she has an amazing story. She was a stockbroker, an attorney, has been a real estate agent for 4 years, and really focuses on social media and the integration of her clients through there. So great to have you on today's show.
Thank you, Garth. It's so good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I am really interested to hear the pathway that you took to becoming a real estate agent in the first place. You already were a stockbroker, you were already an attorney. What led you to real estate?
Well, that is an interesting question. And I moved from stockbroker to lawyer. And then after being a lawyer and I was raising three kids and I was pretty much doing it alone, that's when I became a professional stock trader. And I did that for 15 years to work around the hours of my kids so that I could be there in the morning and I could be there in the afternoon because I'm in California. So I was done at 1, so I could pick them up at school and take them to all of the stuff that they needed. All they had to do was get themselves together in the morning without me because I was sitting in front of a computer trading. And that worked out quite nicely. And to this day, they're very good at making their own meals. So that was a good idea. But anyway, after doing that for 15 years, when they had eventually moved off to college, and I still have one in college right now, I was like, it's kind of a stressful way to live. But during that time, I had bought and sold a couple of houses and was very interested in remodeling homes. So I knew I was very attracted to real estate. And I got this idea that maybe I would learn to flip houses. And so
Okay.
I started doing a lot of research on flipping houses and I found out I was going to have to I didn't have to get licensed as a realtor, but I hate making appointments. So I knew I would not want to call agents to be able to open a house. So it's
Right.
just not who I am. So I decided the way to do this is to become a realtor. So I
Hmm.
did the hurdles that I needed to do to become a realtor. And then, of course, I found out I had to hang my license somewhere, or I still was not going to have the little key card to open the door, which was my ultimate thing. So I started researching all these brokerages and I went to a number of big brokerages and sat for interviews and learned a number of things about those brokerages. And overall, I chose EXP. And then in
Okay.
choosing EXP, I also had done enough research to have known about sponsors, right? And that
Yeah.
sponsors were important. So I started
Hmm.
doing a lot of research on that, just every way that I could get information. And then I, came across Mike Sherrard. I mean, he wasn't the only one that was doing social media, but I thought his was the most thorough, right? It wasn't just YouTube, it was across all the social media. And I didn't know where I would want to land. I had no idea. So I knew I'd want to start with YouTube. So I did sign up with Mike and I jumped right onto YouTube and got going and ended up really liking working with people. So I never did flip houses. I really enjoy this job.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you got licensed. That's been 4 years. What did you go all in right in the beginning, or did you still have your toes in the other water and then you went in later? What was the process of going full time into the business?
That's a really good question. So I did a little bit of waiting in before I let go completely of my prior, but not too long. While I
Hmm.
was the waiting in period for me was probably about only like 4 months. And that is the planning that I took from making that shift as well as ramping up a YouTube channel. Learning how to do it, getting in front of a camera. My first videos were horrible. So bad, so bad. And then I didn't have the money or I didn't want to spend the money to have it edited because it was so expensive. So I bought my own editing software and I learned how to do that too. So literally, like the first horrible video that I made, took not only planning what I was going to do, which obviously I got all that from Mike and Social Agent Academy, how to jump into that, but I filmed it and then I edited it. And the very first one I must have spent 2.5 days just editing it.
Oof.
Yeah, it was a lot. And obviously that got shorter and shorter and shorter over time. But it's like, at first I felt like I was kind of like cheating because I wasn't door knocking or something like that, right?
Mm.
But I realized that I was still investing a great deal of my time. Doing the social media is still spending a lot of time, which is money, time is money, to do something. And no, I wasn't door knocking, but I was doing this. And I was lucky enough that that paid off. After about 3 months, I got my first buyer who didn't live in my area, $3 million buyer. I happened to live in an expensive area, so that was helpful. And the
That
thing that
is
I
helpful.
learned, yeah, the thing that I learned the most from that is that as a newer agent, I didn't know if I was going to have to do like a buyer presentation, and like tell her all about me to, try to get her to, choose me as a buyer agent. I didn't have any of that because she had watched enough YouTubes that she felt like she already knew me. So, and I
Mm.
have since learned every single person who's contacted me from my YouTube channel is hiring me. So I'm not going through steps of having a lead and, having it be a
Mm.
hot lead and interviewing for the job. I don't do any of that. They call me, I work for them. And so I've never looked back and I've never wanted to do anything else besides that, actually. So,
So you already stole my next question, which was how did you get your first deal? That's great. But how did that deal go for you? You get her through YouTube, she reaches out. What happens next? I mean, when you're doing your first deal, it's not always the easiest, least nerve-wracking thing. So how did that deal go?
okay, so it was scary. You're right. Scary along the lines of I had never done it before.
Right.
The part that made me feel good is it's not a new market for me. I've lived in my market for 30 years. So I know the schools, I know the hot spots, I know everything about it. And since I had 3 kids who were all involved in sports, we were all over my county, right? So I know like every school gym in all of Marin County, right? Just little things. And I know what the closest coffee shop is to that because all the parents wanted coffee, during these things. So that was
Mhm.
helpful. And that was the one thing I could hang my hat on where I had a lot of confidence in that. I knew that I knew my area, so that helped. And then it was just going through the procedure of being my first buyer agent situation, which was as simple as like opening the door, with the thing on my phone. I had heard of so many agents having trouble with that, right? And not being able to get in a door in front of the person because they didn't know the procedures to go through. So I practiced. So,
Yeah.
simple enough. I'll just do it over and over again so that I can be nervous and also follow this procedure on my phone.
Yeah.
And and then, getting through it from there, it was, leaning on my mentor because as a new agent at EXP, you are automatically assigned an EXP certified mentor. And
Yeah.
and they need to be a local agent. So
Mm.
I had one of those. My mentor is physically about less than a mile away from me as well in Marin County, but we actually did all of our conversations, online like this or text and messaging. So I would lean on him, and then as a new agent, I'd be like, "Ah, I just asked him that question, and now I don't quite understand, and I need a little bit more information." And I didn't want to call him right back. So, because we're with EXP Realty and the staff in the broker's office, in the broker's room, they're actually all staff, unlike, a broker in a traditional where I'd be bugging the person because they're actually get a percentage of my, commissions to be paid. But at EXP, our brokers are staff. So I was like,
Right.
I'll just jump on EXP World and go talk to one of them. So every time I got stuck with any question, I would go back and forth between my mentor and actually the EXP broker room for California, which to me was a lifesaver. I am the kind of person who has a lot of questions. It comes from being an attorney. So I can hear an answer and then go, oh, it's not quite specific enough for me. Right. And so I'll jump on for all the little subtleties. And that's literally how I got through the first one. And, I still remember the day of like, oh, this is the day I give them their key. So that was just fun. I had to learn like the gifts and the things you want to do for closing gifts. So I had to learn about that as well, but I got a lot of that information from our group. I'm talking so fast, so sorry. It's my normal thing. From our stuff and being able to talk to people about it. So I got through it. Once you get through that first one, yeah, a lot easier.
Okay, I'm going to take a totally random pivot here and ask you a funny question. Okay, so I actually, weirdly enough, I did not grow up with a lot of means, and I went through foster care and everything else. But the people that ended up adopting me, even though had health problems, was an attorney. In fact, he amajured in torts and contracts. So that helped with the development in my business quite a lot and me understanding and conceptualizing process, offers, contracts, and things like that, because I wasn't allowed, at least in my household, to write a contract until I had read all of contract law. So, and then read every single contract and understood it. Here is a hotly contested debate, at least in my circle and in my mind. This is a consistently used terminology in our industry, and I want to hear your thoughts about it.
Okay.
Mutual acceptance.
Mutual acceptance. So are you referring to between us and a client?
When an agent then says, we have mutual acceptance.
Okay. I guess I'm getting a point because there's quite a few different ways that would come up in our industry.
You wrote an offer.
And they accepted it.
Counters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the agent says, we have mutual acceptance.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that terminology?
Well, in California, we wouldn't have to say that. Unfortunately, Garth, everything is different in every state, and I'm only licensed in California, but you would never have to say that. If you have an offer and it's accepted, you've formed a contract, and you do not have to follow that up with there's been mutual acceptance.
Right. So what I've found is even in both markets that I come to, even though there's no procedure around that, it's in the agent vernacular. And it's so ingrained, even when I was getting my hours in the NAR class, the NAR teacher was talking about mutual acceptance. In fact, in the training classes to get your license, they still use that terminology. And here's my rub with it, and I want to hear if you agree. Only one person can accept because one person has to make the offer. And there's differences from a legal perspective. If there's ambiguity in that offer, that changes things. You can't both accept it because the person that writes it obviously has different leverage in their responsibility to the person accepting it. And so them naturally saying mutual acceptance to me is a massive misnomer, because if things did escalate and land in a courtroom, there would be a logistical difference. Even when somebody's counter offering, they have rejected the offer and then offered something different. And if that person accepts, that's now the person who offered and the person who accepted. But people in our industry are saying mutually accepted, and that doesn't make any sense to me by the letter of the law, personally. But I am not a licensed attorney. I've just read contract law. And when I have brought this up to agents, they look at me like I'm insane. But you are an attorney. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and you're not insane. And I'm glad that doesn't come up in California around that. I've never said there's been mutual acceptance, because you're absolutely right. It's different based on who wrote it and who accepted it. And there's only been acceptance on one side, even if it shifts. With a counter, it's again, all over again. There's one offer and one acceptance. So I think that's a really good thing that you're right to have that rub you wrong. And I'm just glad it doesn't come up here, because I would also be all over that, because it literally doesn't make any sense. And yet I think back about it. First of all, I'm really surprised the term amjured. That's something that I heard you say that earlier, that your attorney person had amjured. I also amjured in two topics, but contracts was not one of them. It was actually civil procedure
Uh,
and something else. Anyway, constitutional law of all things. So
oh,
yeah. So, in fact, I struggle with contracts at first, and so, but I'm not dismissing this mutual acceptance. I do agree that I'd have a very hard time getting my head around that if people wanted to have conversations with me about that. So, you're absolutely right.
it,
And
it pisses me off. It
yeah.
makes me want to go get a law degree so I can yell at people. But anyways, here's my next question. So you've been in the business for 4 years now, and it sounds like you're full steam, all in on YouTube, all in on social media. How has that grown over time? How has your channel grown over time? And what would you say to somebody that is just now stepping into the creation of a social media account?
That's a lot. Okay, so over time, I started with YouTube and then I expanded who I could reach by doing all the short form as well.
Mm,
And I gotta
mm,
admit, I do cheat on those, but it still works, although now I'm starting to change that. What I mean by cheat is I just did long form videos and then I cut them up. Right, and
mhm,
cut them up and, put them back on all the short form places. But now I actually have scripts for them that I do
mm,
film them because it makes a lot of difference. And, you don't have very long to say. The hook makes a big difference, just like
mm,
the hook in a YouTube. But if you're cutting it up, you have one hook, and maybe 7 clips that you came up with short form. So now it is worth the time to do it. And I'm just doing that now. So I've been really happy with that. It has grown over time. I have enough people to work with at all times. It's just a pretty consistent group of people that come through. My channel also grew over time. You know, I might have a couple of things working for me, which is that I happen to live in a county where very few agents have even thought of doing social media.
That's helpful.
Yeah, well, it's helpful in some ways. It's not so helpful in another way, which I'll share in a second, but very helpful because, yeah, I didn't really have competition, especially along the lines of going all in. The downside is when I wanted to use other people's listings and film those, I was always told no because every single agent in my area has an intimidation level around that they're not on YouTube. And as a matter of fact, as you know, it kind of makes them look bad that they can't put their client's property on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. They don't do
Yeah.
it. And so they don't want me jumping in and doing something that right off the bang embarrasses them in front of their own client because why
Mm,
didn't they put their house on these social media platforms? So that's been the only downside. But of course, I don't have that problem with EXP people. And as we've been growing, there's a lot more of those in my area.
mm.
So that's been helpful. And your last question was a new agent starting social media,
Yeah,
right?
what would you say to them?
Yeah. My favorite thing is, to just not expect perfection. It's you're not going to be perfect. It's just about doing the action. Have a plan and just do it. No matter, how good you feel in front of a camera or how, any way that you feel. And I spent probably my first month that every time I would film a video, I would walk through my house to get a cup of coffee and say, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. And so that was just my mantra to get through it. And over time, it got better. But I would say the number one advice is action. If you don't act, nothing's going to happen. So
Yeah.
it's just get it going, have a plan, have a goal of what you want to get out of it. You have to give it some time. And if you're not
Mm,
gaining traction, you have to evaluate whether or not you're providing the kind of content that people want to see. So you do have to look in a little bit. You can't be super boring or talk about things that nobody cares about.
mm.
One of the things I
Yeah.
would say did help me a lot is when I did start doing market reports. I think that
Okay.
that was an easy thing to jump on and do because I had information from my MLS, every month, and I could do a separate report on the whole county, one on single family homes and one on just condominiums and townhouses. So that created a whole lot of content for me and attracted people who are looking to buy, because those are the people who are, watching that content, although sellers have an interest in it as well.
Yeah.
So,
No, that makes a ton of sense. And then I would also urge everybody, if you're gonna look up Carrie, make sure to follow her on YouTube. She's gonna have great content there. But do not, if you're just now creating a channel, do not watch my channel, watch her channel, and look at our chapter 10 and evaluate your first video. Don't do it. Just start the journey, build your camera confidence. It will come with time and with repetition. Now, last question. Why did you join not just EXP, because we heard a little bit about that, but why did you pick the Wolfpack as your organization that you wanted to be a part of?
so I kind of mentioned it because I was drawn to doing the social media route. And I looked at other people at EXP because I'd already decided on EXP by this point, and saw some of the other competitors that offer a little something, a little YouTube, little Facebook. Mike's seemed to be the most thorough. So that's really how I started my journey, but I got so much more out of it than I expected, because I hadn't really thought about how would it be like to go to these mastermind calls or the other things. We didn't have the hub then. That came about afterwards. I was really happy when that showed up. But and I wasn't planning on building a revenue share downline. That was not something that I was thinking. And I think that's not unusual for most people who come to EXP. They're not thinking about that. And then for me, about a year into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should do this too. This is incredible. This is an amazing lifetime career opportunity, and beyond our career too, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so it was very simple to choose the Wolfpack, and then I just ended up getting so much more than I had expected from it, and really has driven. Oh, and by the way, it's the whole mastermind calls. I didn't expect how nice that would be as far as a community, right?
Yeah.
That we talk to each other, you get to know people a little bit. You go to EXPCon with the girls, there's lots of screaming because, lots of screaming to meet people and see people again that we see on all these calls. But I've had some times where my business just got so busy that I couldn't make the calls for like a couple of weeks. And I would find that if I missed them for just a couple of weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to find the time and go to the call because I'm feeling disconnected. I'm feeling lonely even.
I will say that that's not a normal feeling in the industry. If you miss something, you just don't care, is what's normal. And but to that end, guys, I want to say if you're looking to partner with me or with Carrie, make sure to click the link in the description below. You can schedule the time to have a conversation with me. In the notes, say that you found me through the conversation with Carrie here, and we'll all get connected. I really appreciate you all coming to another episode of The Choice. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.